Hello, faithful listeners. Before you begin this particular podcast, I just want to make sure you understand that it is a direct continuation of the last episode. It's a multi-part series sharing the testimony of our Father's heart and how it came to fruition as two individuals' lives were merged together and eventually became one in Christ Jesus. So before you continue listening to this second part, please make sure that you've listened to the first part and then enjoy the rest of the testimony. The vision received was that of blood cells traveling throughout the body, supplying the much-needed oxygen and other nutrients to the differing members of the body to fulfill their purpose. Once the blood cells are spent, they must return back to the heart to be refilled before being sent out again and fulfill their purpose.
And the thing about it is, I don't know, I think that might be right before all of that. I think when I was still trying to stay in the Catholic Church, because that reminded me, I had made an appointment to talk to the priest, not just about the Bible. One other thing that I asked him about was the abortion. And I asked him, why is it that I've gone to confession and I still don't feel forgiven? I did ask him that question.
Give us a timeline so we understand when this is happening. 80s, 90s?
This was in the late 80s.
Late 80s.
And yeah, late 80s.
So was Roe v. Wade in 86?
I don't know.
I don't know. Okay.
I know I used to vote for everyone that voted for that, and then all of a sudden I flipped on it and my family was like, what? You're on the other side of this now?
So it's the late 80s. You go to your priest and you say, why hasn't things changed?
For me, why do I still feel guilt? Why is this
in regards to the abortion?
Yeah, because
okay.
I had confessed it, and whatever he answered me, I don't remember because I don't want to put words in his mouth, but whatever he answered me,
it was dissatisfying.
It was very dissatisfying. I didn't feel like he had addressed it. I didn't feel like he had given me I didn't trust his answer. Like he knew what he was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if it must have been before, because I don't know if that whole thing happened. Now that I had never thought about this, that how the Lord so interestingly does this a lot in my life, where I'm thinking about something, or I'm wondering about something, or I'm struggling with something, and then the answer comes. And in that particular instant, it was not only an answer, it was deliverance. He set me free, because I never again felt guilt. I know it's not right, but I felt that I had been forgiven, and I moved on. Like I really moved on. It wasn't there anymore. So there were a lot of instances that the Lord did that. And with me, I was very hungry. I was very curious, and I assumed everyone that comes into the faith is that way. And over time I found out no. So then I've been humbled by God, because it's like, how did you convince me so much? Or how did you get to me where I was so hungry, where I would sleep with the Bible and books on my bed? I would wake up and go to sleep reading everything I could. I was a voracious reader of God. I just wanted God. I couldn't get enough of him. Every seminar, every Bible study series, anything that I could go to be a part of, I wanted to be a part of. I didn't feel like I could grasp the Bible by myself fully. I'd never tackled the Old Testament. I had another friend that their family adopted me, and they were my age, but they called me their child. I lived with them for a year, but she had a series of books that went through the Old Testament, and I put myself through that. That was before I went to ministry school, because I was so starving to know everything I could about God. And I was always humbled by the things that he did and confirming himself to me. He was always confirming his word, always. And it would come to me in multiple witnesses. It would be different people, like I said, that were not connected to each other. Mm-hmm. One time I heard Johnny Erickson Tata. If anybody doesn't know who she is, she was a woman who, I think in a diving accident in a lake, became a paraplegic. Mm-hmm. And she was doing radio broadcasting, for devotionals. And I heard her, and she was talking about, she paints with her mouth. She uses her mouth and stuff. But she was talking about this, how she said this to herself, and it was, great is thy faithfulness, Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have
needed,
my heart,
I have ever wanted.
Yeah, great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Okay, so I was like, whoa, that is so cool. And I went and I told this friend of mine at the gym, I'm like, I just heard this broadcast and she said these words and she said, Patricia, that's a song we sing in church. And I'm like, what? I've never heard that song. And so I think she invited me to her church and I think she told the people to play that song. And, you know, I heard the song and I was like, oh my goodness, that's an amazing song. And I got into it. My other friend, Marcy, got me into Hosanna Integrity. They sang the word. So I learned a lot of the word too through song. Because then I would sing these songs and then I would be reading the Bible and I'd be like, wait a minute, I just sang that in church last week. So God he did a lot of that for me in the beginning of my walk and continues to.
Well, I think one of the examples of your testimony, if people are listening or extrapolate, because you keep wondering, why is it that the Lord was so good to you? Why was it? And it's just because he's merciful. I mean, that's flat out. That's flat out. He was just merciful. But he's merciful to everybody. But not everybody gets the same results as you did. And the reason why, it goes back to the parable of the sower. There's some places that are the wayside. They don't embrace the word at all. They're just ignorant to it. Then you got some that are like the thorny. Then you got some that are like the stony. And you got some that are of the good ground. Well, even the thorny ground received the word. But it had issues. Issues of the cares of this world, the affairs of this life, consumed them. And so the fruit didn't come through with that. And then you got the stony heart, which also received the word. But the word was not able to create root in itself. And then there was the good ground. But the good ground embraced it. And the good ground found or made a place for that seed to take root in itself. And you keep describing how you were just so hungry. You were just so thirsty. You would just go after him. You would seek him. You wouldn't take challenges as an offense. You would take challenges and you'd want to go and seek it out yourself. And it's when you mix faith, because all of that are actions of faith. Because if you didn't believe in what you were hearing, you would ignore it and go on about your business. But the reason why it affected you so is because you mixed your faith with it. You heard what it said and you were like, I want that for me. And not in a selfish way, but in like realizing that's a better life. I want a better life. And so you went after it as and you're just describing as you did it. And that's why, even though other people have maybe experienced very similar experiences to you, they didn't get the same result. It's not that the Lord didn't love you more than them, but they didn't respond the way that you responded. And I think that's the key in many lives. I mean, the outcomes don't always have to be the same. But, there's some people that have been through your situation, previous marriage, horrible experiences, and maybe they didn't get married again. Maybe they didn't get to have a family again. But that doesn't mean that the Lord wasn't faithful to them. And if they responded the way that you did, the Lord can turn out their life in a very, very positive way. And it didn't have to be the same as you, that you got married again later on and had 3 kids. But it's always the response of the heart. I share this with some of my students in my classes. I shared this last year with a student that was just having issues of attitude. She just wasn't grateful and wasn't thankful. And now I'm blanking on the name of the person. But basically the message was, attitude is everything. And he was saying, we all go through experience. I'm paraphrasing. We all go through experiences in life, and it's how you respond to those experiences that make all the difference in the world. Some of us will have the same experience as someone else. Someone offended us, someone insulted us, someone demeaned us. And the way that I responded is going to determine how I overcome that or not overcome that. Another person, same type of experience, has a different decision. And that's going to determine whether she overcomes that or not. And that's what I think happens, in our lives. And it's not that the Lord loves anybody more than another. But, like I said in the last episode, if anybody listened to it, I was asking the Lord, why, how, because I struggled to understand how he could be so merciful to me. And then he spoke to me. I did it with Noah. Why wouldn't I do it with you? Why wouldn't I give you that same mercy? He treats everyone with the same type of mercy, but it's how we respond to him that appropriates those promises that he has for everyone. The general promises that God has for everyone are for everyone. It says he was slain from the foundation of the world. That means everyone has the opportunity to be redeemed, to be saved, to be delivered, to be healed. But why isn't everybody saved? Why are there some people that are going to go to hell? Why are there some people that are going to the lake of fire? Because of the way they responded. It's on them. God doesn't have to do anything else. It says he rested on the seventh day from all of his works. So it's not on him anymore. I've given you this day. Choose you this day whom you will serve. Choose life, choose death, choose blessing, choose cursing. But you choose now.
Right.
Because I've made everything available to you. So I appreciate you sharing all that. I'm glad you've been so honest, because I think the marriage, I was wondering if you were going to share it. Not that I thought you'd be afraid to. And your abortion, I didn't know if you were going to bring that up. Because it's those type of things that, people, if they ever do get to know you at the present moment, I think those are integral parts of your testimony to explain why are you where you're at now. Because some people will say, well, you did it when you were young. How could you speak against it now? Well, because now I know better. Because the Lord has shown me. But you struggled a lot before you ever met me. And it was due, a lot of it was due to your marriage. A lot of it was due even farther back to your parents. So let's just focus on that marriage. How long were you previously married before you eventually got divorced?
If counting the years that we separated.
Officially divorced. I'm not talking about separation. When you got married, how long was your marriage until you estimate.
I have to do the math. So 9 years is what it was when he left the last time. And we had done the separations like 4 times.
In between. So it was a 9-year marriage.
Yeah.
Okay.
But then we separated, and then the divorce came through 3 or 4 years after that. Okay. I prayed for 3 or 4 years in the faith about it.
Do you remember the year of the divorce?
Was I was 80s, living 90s? In Miami. No, it was in the 90s, because I was living in Miami already, and there were so many people that God were watching my movie as it played out. So many people that
Meaning your life.
Yeah, they were waiting for the shoe to drop, kind of like what we've had to go through recently in our school being, or our state being the only one that had in-person school, that kind of stuff. So there were a lot of people that were watching for that shoe to drop. Even people that didn't know me when it started. Everyone that I met, because that was my testimony. And I know that it didn't end the way I thought it was going to, but the Lord prepared me for that. But by the time it happened, it was fine. I wasn't crushed. And then in hindsight, we're always wanting God. I always say, God, I pray these things. We say, but you're not my will, but yours be done. Because honestly, sometimes we are so short-sighted with what we're praying. We don't see what the implications of what we want is. He does. So it may seem like he's not answering a prayer. He answers the desire of our heart, but maybe not necessarily the way we think it's going to play out. So I think that would be a case, because he always, when I doubted that I even heard him about being married, because that fell apart. And ironically, Chris, that was the name of the first person, he didn't want children. And so then he gets married and he has children. I'm like, okay, What is up with that?
That hurt.
I had a real heart-to-heart with God about this. I was very angry. I remember I went to go see that movie, Tootsie, was that it? Where the guy lost his family, and it was supposed to be funny, and I thought it was, Dustin Hoffman was the actor. And
the guy that dressed like a girl.
I was incredibly upset after that movie because it touched on that theme. So I had a heart-to-heart with God about it because I'm like, here I am wanting to have a family. I want to have a marriage the way you said. I want to have children. And the person who didn't want this, who, wrecked my, I felt wrecked my life, wrecked my credit, wrecked a lot of things. He's getting it. Why is that? And I wrestled with that a lot. But the Lord kept telling me, I am preparing a person for you. I am preparing your husband. I'm preparing you for him.
I'm glad you mentioned that because that's where I'm kind of going with this. You met me in December 1997 for the first time.
Yes.
When did you divorce officially? You said it was the 90s. How far back from 97?
92? 93? Somewhere in there.
Okay. I won't say what happened to me in 92 because then that might, everybody could figure out everything from there. But let's go back further. You said that there was a prophecy spoken over you.
Yes.
Early on. I'm assuming it was before the 90s.
It was.
So it was the late 80s and was in this Restoration Church.
It was actually in 91 because that's when I moved to Miami. So it was probably...
Okay, so it was right before you left.
Yes.
Okay. So how long were you part of Restoration Church?
So from 83, 3 years, yeah.
3 years? You said 83 or you meant 3 years?
88, sorry, 88.
Okay, 88 to 91. Okay, so it was in the late 80s that God seemed to be getting a hold of you.
Yes.
You slowly came out of the Catholic Church. You started getting more into the Word. You became a part of Restoration Church, which is a non-denominational church. But there was a lot of body ministry.
Yes.
There, where there was, ministering, healing to your fellow brethren.
Yes.
Men and women. And then learning how to move in the gifts of the Spirit.
Yes.
So I assume if you were moving in the gifts of the Spirit, then they believed in the baptism of the Holy Ghost?
Yes. Okay,
so did you receive the baptism of the Holy Ghost?
I did.
Okay, when was that?
Okay, so that was another interesting story. I went to, I think it was Kenneth Copeland, because he was in that area. So they kind of, they weren't, it wasn't an affiliation, but all the ministries in Dallas were united. Kind of like they were trying to reach the communities.
A lot less division.
There was no division. So when I came to Miami and I ran into that, I was like,
I don't know about no division, but
very little that I was aware of. I wasn't aware of it.
More cohesion back then.
There was much more cohesion.
Okay.
And so I went to this Bible thing that Kenneth Copeland's church was having, and they were talking about stuff. And I don't remember what the topic was, but somebody asked the question of, well, how do you pray when you're struggling with something? Mm-hmm. How do you know what to pray? And they said, well, you pray in your prayer language. And I'm like, I raised my hand. I was like, what's a prayer language? I mean, there was a lot of people there and everyone looks at me and I'm just like, well, I've never heard that. What is a prayer language? And so they were like, do you want to have a prayer language? Would you like to receive the Spirit? And I'm like, yeah, I sure would.
Okay, so then their understanding, just to clarify for others, because there are some ways that things are described that are not really things that we believe in, but we understand where they're coming from, and this is the way they describe it, like slain in the Spirit, and, prayer language. I mean, that's not even in the scriptures, but let's go beyond that. Okay, so when they said prayer language, then they tied it to, well, do you want to receive the Spirit? Yes. So obviously to them, you can't have a prayer language unless you receive the Spirit.
Right.
Okay. So from there, they talk about, well, do you want to receive the Spirit? And what was your answer?
Yes.
Okay, so what happened?
I went to the front and they prayed for me. And I fell back again. And
this is a different one.
Yeah.
Well, did they push you?
No.
The wind didn't come and knock you underneath your feet?
No.
Did your knees buckle and you just got all weak or something?
You're asking me to analyze something that I just know I fell.
It just happened.
Just fell. And so I was laying on my back.
You can't help others kind of realize, well, this is probably what it might, feel like. It's just, you just fell back.
I was praying and
Did
then
somebody catch you?
Probably.
Or you just fell on the floor on your back?
No, I think they had people. I think that's, I don't know.
I mean, that's usually what we see on TV. I
just remember being on my back, and when I opened my eyes, I was praying.
Uh-huh.
And there was Marcy's sister was there, and she was praying over me, and she was crying, and she's like, I think she told me I was praying in tongues and I had received the Spirit, but I was praying in the Spirit.
Okay, so you recognized it. It wasn't you were just told that you did it? I didn't understand,
because I really didn't. I just was praying in the Spirit, and then they told me, you're praying in the Spirit. I mean, I didn't, like, some people, I don't know, some people, like, really want to pray in tongues. I didn't even know what that was until
that was probably good, because I think that's one of the things that causes people today to get lost.
Yeah.
That you heard about a prayer language, but then they tied it to, do you want to receive the Spirit? You didn't know what that meant. You didn't know what that looked like. You didn't know what that was about. So there was no ideas in your mind that were blockading you from actually just flowing with the Spirit and whatever He does with you. Whereas some people today, they're more focused on, speaking in tongues.
Yeah.
And they're so focused on the idea of speaking in tongues that they can't get beyond the fact that it's not about speaking in tongues. It's just about receiving the gift of the Holy Spirit. And you're just going to flow in tongues unbeknownst to you, or not out of your own volition. It's going to be as the Spirit gives you utterance. You're just going to do these things. So that kind of gets in people's heads, and they can't get beyond that. But that didn't happen with you because you didn't know what to do. You didn't know what to expect.
Right.
They prayed over you, and the Spirit had its way with you.
I was hungry. I think the feeling for me always was whatever God, when they said that, I'm like, I want that. I want to, because also I had the need of being able to pray and knowing how to pray. Mm-hmm. Because I had all the tangled mess that was going on in my life, and I wanted to be able to pray God's will. And this was like, this is a guaranteed way I'm going to pray God's will. So I was praying in the Spirit a lot after that, all the time. I was up at night. I was battling in the Spirit. I took that literally.
So that which was never in you became a common occurrence.
It became a common occurrence. My friends,
or a common practice. If you
my friends that I lived with said I would even do it when I was sleeping. Like they said, you were praying in tongues last night. I'm like, oh, okay.
I could testify to that.
Oh, I do that.
Well, you're mumbling something. I don't know what you're saying.
Well, they said I was praying really loud.
Sometimes you go to bed and you're praying, and then it's almost like a continual prayer through the night type of thing. But that's fine.
But yeah, so it became a integral part of my life. I did Joshua marches. I would go in situations that I was in that sometimes there was a building. I would march around the building 7 times. I was just. I said, well, that happened in the Old...
You're putting into practice what was in the Scriptures.
That happened in the Old Testament. Why can't it happen now? Lord, I'm standing on your word, and I'm going to go do this.
Okay. So that happened before 91?
Yes.
Okay, so you had received the baptism of the Holy Ghost. You talked about how you wanted to get baptized, which is a different baptism. That happened beforehand. And then 91... or 90 came around, this prophecy was spoken over you, that you were going to have a family. Could you clarify that again?
Yeah, that he was going to, it was a lot, so...
as best you can.
He was going to give me a family, and he was going to give me 2 children, because I think when I shared the prophecy with my mom, she thought I was going to be working in an orphanage. I think that was the idea it kind of got in me too, and then I was going to be a missionary. I had a lot of ideas of what God meant by a lot of things that he said, and that's not exactly the way it played out. And then he would show me, but it did, but just not the way I thought. Not the traditional
was one
way.
of the ways you thought that this prophecy was going to come to pass was to
restoration
get back together
of the marriage.
to your marriage.
Yes.
Okay. And then 1 year later, the marriage is over. Is that
or
right?
Not 1 year. I think it was a couple of years, because when I moved to Miami, the thought was...
So 92?
Maybe, or 93.
Okay.
Somewhere.
But definitely the prophecy was in 90.
Yeah.
Because you said you had to wait 7 years. And you met me December of 97.
And the thing is, too, after that, I was in restoration. I graduated from ministry school. The next prophecy that came was not one that I was very thrilled about. But I was thinking about moving to Miami, but Miami was a bear because my ex-husband had moved to Miami with his girlfriend.
Well, why did you want to move to Miami?
Well, there were saints there. I don't know. I felt like God was telling me to, but I didn't want to. I was afraid to.
You don't think it had anything to do with him moving to Miami?
Yeah, no, but I was afraid to because I was gonna have to face that, but in my heart, I knew this has to have a resolution, and it's not gonna have one with me here and him there, something like that.
Okay.
But I was wrestling with it, and I was at church, and it's not something I spoke to a lot of people. And again, we were in a big church, so like for the pastor to, I didn't really ever. I did go to his house because my best friend's sister was married to his son, but it wasn't like we were super close or anything. But he was a gentleman. I really loved him a lot. I loved listening to him. He went on rabbit trails, but I loved listening to him. We were at a probably a body ministry meeting. Like we were a meeting about how this vision they had of bringing different giftings together, making little groups of giftings to pray over people. Like, mm-hmm. So if you were mercy and word of knowledge and prophetic and, healing, like little pockets of people would end up not on purpose coordinated. It worked out. It actually did. I saw it working, but it wasn't just one person praying, and it wasn't just the leaders. It was all these people that had been equipped to do this. So I was in that. I was in all of that. And, we were praying with each other. We were praying over each other. And he came up to me and he told me, "You're standing at the bank of the Jordan. And the Lord is telling you need to cross to the other side. And you're afraid because you don't know what's on the other side. But if you stay on this side, everything that you have is going to die." Like, that was so direct. I understood you can't stay here. This is not where you're supposed to be.
So you knew it in your heart.
I did.
God was speaking to you. So
I knew.
You now just described two ways God has spoken to you. He's spoken to you through the Word, even though people were telling you the same thing, but it was through the Word that you understood what He's speaking. Now you're recognizing that He's now speaking you through someone who just prophesies to you.
Yep.
Didn't know you?
He knew me, but he didn't know my particulars.
Your situation? Okay.
He knew I had graduated from the ministry school.
Okay.
So the people...
But the confirmation that you heard was in your heart.
It was something God had already been... I was wrestling with the Lord about.
So it confirmed something He had already spoken to you.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's important, for others to hear and listen to, because a lot of times when we're wrestling with God and He's speaking to us, He doesn't just turn away and say, "Oh, well, they're not listening." He sometimes sends somebody else to repeat the same word, and we see that in the scriptures. He sent prophets again and again and again to minister to His people what He had already been speaking to them. And then after a while, then He might, say, "Okay, well, I'm going to give them what they want, and even it's going to cause their calamity." But there are different ways that we hear the Lord, but it started with the Word speaking into your heart. Then it started with someone speaking into your heart what the Lord was already speaking into your heart as a confirmation. Okay. And
then the common witness of the people in the ministry school, Dick Dungan was one of them, mm-hmm. that this is what you need to do. Although my other best friend that I'm very close to, she didn't want me to go.
Right.
I think she knew what was waiting for me, but also there was, there would be a separation with us. But nevertheless, it was like the people when they crossed into the promised land, they had enemies to deal with. So when I came to Miami, I was in a church that was very open armed. They were happy that I was there. But I had a lot of things to deal with. I had to find a job. I ended up back in law firms, and I thought I was supposed to be a missionary, so I was kind of salty about that with God. I ended up living in a place not too far from where my ex-husband was living, like probably 3 streets down.
And you moved into Miami when?
91.
91.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was living in Coral Gables. That's where I ended up moving. And the thing about it is that I tell people, So, you know what? My timeline is wrong. He probably was 94, maybe. I don't know. Because the time that I was in Coral Gables, the only time I never ran into him and his girlfriend. He would just come to my apartment. So we had a dog, and he gave me the dog back when I moved to Miami. We had a dog that he had taken to Miami, and then.
So it was early 90s.
Yeah.
To try to be.
Yeah, I know you're trying to narrow me down, but I'm just fuzzy on the.
Well, no, it's not about me narrowing it down. I just.
The prophecy was spoken in 90.
90.
That is true.
Okay. Because my mom died in my previous testimony in the previous podcast in 94. So I was trying to merge the two stories together because we were separated.
Yeah.
We didn't know each other until 97. I'm trying to get everybody to see how we kind of connected together. So my mom died in 94, and that created a tailspin for me, but led me where it needed to be. But go ahead.
But, and it's possible it was then. Because I lived in Coral Gables, and I worked in Brickell. And then I started working in downtown Miami, and God just did amazing things in all of those settings, even though I wasn't happy to be there. And I had a lot of battles in that first job. I was temping, and they hired me, and then it was like a nightmare. One of the most nightmare jobs I've ever had. As good of a secretary as I was, I had to battle a lot of things. But he always gave me favor in all of the situations that I went in. And I tell people all that time that I was living in Coral Gables, shopping at the one supermarket, I never ran into the girl ever. I never ran into her.
Even though you lived in the same vicinity as your ex-husband.
And there were people in my church that engaged with them, and I never ever ran into them.
Okay. So, what was the finality of that situation?
The finality of that is their relationship fell apart, and I knew that was God. So I tell people, we didn't get together, but I was not ashamed. That relationship fell apart. He did the same thing to her, not being married, like wrecked her credit. She kicked him out, basically, and he moved back to Dominican Republic. And then I heard from the person that knew her that she was packing up her stuff and moving back she was from the Northeast or something. Okay. And I felt led. We were about to have a hurricane or something, and I went to their place and I left her a note. And I told her that, I
This wasn't Hurricane Andrew, was it?
Maybe. Wait, when
Andrew was in
Hurricane?
92 in August.
Oh, well then that's when that was. Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, that'll help tie it down.
Well, yeah, those are landmarks because August 92 is when Hurricane Andrew came into Florida, and that demolished all of southern Florida.
Yeah. So I think after the hurricane, because I think right after that
they broke up.
Right before Hurricane Andrew, he was not there when the Hurricane Andrew happened.
So she's packing up. She's even back to the Northeast. He went to DR. Then what happened?
I left her a note. I never saw her, but I left her a note, and I told her that I had forgiven everything that had happened, and I was really sorry she had gone through what she did, and I would be praying for her, and that was all. That was just one of my little faith things that I do. My friends are like, "Are you crazy? What are you thinking?" I'm like, I've got to extend. I need to do that, and I did. And with him, he
even though you had no relationship with her.
I had no relationship with her.
So you needed to do that, even though you had no relationship with her.
I did because I felt like indirectly.
It was your fault.
No, but indirectly he had done. Okay, she wasn't married to him, and in my mind I was. So I was fine with him coming to my house and stuff, which was not right. The Lord showed me later on I had not really.
You let yourself be a doormat.
I did, but I felt like I just felt like even though she was not where she needed to be, I understood how she felt, because I had gone through it. And I wanted, I guess mercy kicked in. I'm a merciful person, even with a person that would technically be considered an enemy. Mm-hmm. I was very merciful. And I pray that somewhere in her life, because I did pray for her when they were together, because I understood that you're to pray for your enemy, so I was praying all the time. So maybe the Lord just developed a heart in me to pray for her and do what I did. But there was a release in my heart when that happened, and shortly thereafter, I did get a call from his attorney over there, who was a friend of ours, that they wanted to know if they could serve my family who had moved to the Dominican Republic with divorce papers. And I said no, because they didn't marry him, I did. And then he was like, well, then it's going to get published in the papers. And I said, that's fine. I haven't done anything wrong. He can do whatever he wants. I'm not going to fight it, but I'm not going to divorce him, because I understand I understood that was not biblical.
Okay, so let's go back to that. You're saying before you got married, both of you were not in covenant with the Lord. We were not. You were not Christian. But in the time of your marriage, you became a Christian.
Yes.
Okay. So then at the end, when he served you divorce papers in DR, they needed to serve it to you, but you didn't live in DR, and they weren't going to come to Florida to give it to you, so they wanted to serve it to your family.
Yes.
So in DR, if that's not possible that you can serve it to the individual or their relatives, they publish it in the newspaper as a...
They have to publish it for 3 days as a notification to the other party to contest it.
Okay. So he was getting a divorce because he wanted something from you, or just to say the divorce is settled? He wasn't trying to get something from you?
He wasn't trying to get anything from me.
How could you contest someone who wants a divorce?
Well, to fight the divorce,
you could force him to stay married?
Well,
if you wanted to?
I wasn't going to do that.
No, but I'm saying in DR that you could force someone to stay married?
You can go to divorce court. Yeah, you can.
That's odd. Okay. So then you got divorced.
Well, he divorced me, yes.
Right, you got a divorce. Okay, so what was that? That was after Hurricane Andrew.
Yeah, it was after whatever I told you happened. I come to find out that the reason he did the divorce later on from my parents, because small world, Dominican Republic, they knew his parents, but also they were friends with the parents of a girl who was seeing him from Puerto Rico. And those people had called my parents to ask them about him. And my dad had no nice words to say. I was a little upset with my dad about that, because that wasn't the kind of person that I was, but it happened that way. And so because of that, I had to find out a lot of things that I would rather not know. So I found out that he had gotten this girl pregnant. So he divorced me so he could marry her to marry, to settle that whole situation.
And how did you take that when that was all said and done?
It was hard, and actually right before that all happened, he had called me and asked me if he could come and use the car. He was going to come to Miami, if he could use my car, and he wanted to see the dog and all of that. And right around that time, I had a cousin that died of a sudden massive heart attack, and he was younger than me, so it was a shocking thing. And when that happened, another common friend called me, and he was crying on the phone. And as I was going through all of that, I think the Lord spoke to me, and I know he did. He said, "You are settling. This is not what I want for you, in letting Chris use me." Because I would always feel like, I wouldn't feel like a wife. I felt like, a prostitute. And the Lord told me, "You're settling. This is not what I want for you." And when he dropped that word in my spirit, and I was broken about my cousin dying, because I think I had tried to talk to him about the Lord, and I was pretty sure he did not receive the Lord. So I was like really devastated about this cousin dying. And I was understanding the gravity of salvation and not knowing the Lord, and what was I doing, and how was that helping Chris come to know the Lord. So when Chris called me to, make arrangements to come and get the car and whatever, I told him no. I said, "No, I don't want you coming to my house anymore. You don't need to see the dog anymore. And you are not allowed to use my car. You're going to have to figure something else out." And then it was a few weeks after that I got the call about the divorce.
Okay.
So.
Your whole thought process when you got the prophecy was that it was going to be him. Mm-hmm. Then he gets the divorce. What did that do to that word that you supposedly received through prophecy? Did you begin to doubt, or what?
I didn't. I doubted, but not like doubt God. I went into a tailspin. I started doubting who I was, and that if I was even worthy of anything that God had spoken to me.
Okay.
And I put myself in bad situations. I was still trying. I never stopped talking about God, but I compromised him. when I was doing it. I got into relationships with men and it just, they knew I was a Christian, but I always ended up compromising God. Mm-hmm. So I was really torn, but I had a couple of friends that, with the people that I met the people that God used in my life, I was still connected to them. I was still calling them. They would still pray with me on the phone. And every time I fell and I felt like I'm not worthy of the Lord and I'm backslidden and I'm, all the things that people do when they fall, they would pray for me and they would tell me, get up and keep walking. You are God's child. And I think that broke me a lot because I thought they were going to reject me. And they didn't. They just were loving me through that. They were trying to help me. I never got oh my God, I can't believe you did that reaction.
You never got a word of condemnation.
I never ever got a word of condemnation from any of them. And that broke me because I know it was just God showing his love to me. And he was still blessing me. When I was doing all this, I was getting blessed. Seemingly. I broke my arm in 94.
Okay, so see.
Yeah, I was already divorced at that time.
All right, so 91 you get the prophecy. 90. 90 you get the prophecy. 92 Andrew Hurricane comes, but he's already broken off his relationship. He's back in DR. About probably 93, he wants to come to your house to borrow your car, blah, blah, blah. A couple months later, he then initiates divorce. So it sounds like it's 93. And then what happened in 94?
Actually, I met a distant cousin that had a cocaine addiction, and I met his whole family, and I started ministering to them, and he started coming to the church I was in, and then that's where I got caught up in a relationship with him because I was very close to him, and he was very needy, and I was talking to him about God, but there was like this very, very not healthy thing going on. And so a codependency of sorts because I felt responsible for him. I was a Christian. I could pray him out of that. And I went through that whole cycle. And then I broke my arm because I had been lending him my car. I broke my arm in
94.
Yeah. And then he totaled my car. He was a driver and he wrecked his car and he needed a car and I lent him mine and then I ended up with nothing. And then I broke my arm. So seemingly a lot of things were not going well for me. I left the church I was at and then this is where God just started doing amazing miracles because I couldn't get any government help, any financial help. My parents were about to move to Dominican Republic. And the guy who was landlord to my apartment, wanted me to sue the building, that it was their fault that I fell and broke my arm. And I said, no, it wasn't their fault. I slipped on the stairs and I broke my arm. So he got the insurance people to come to talk to me. And I told them the same thing I did him. And they gave me a settlement check. I had a humongous bill at the hospital. And they told me, don't pay that money to the hospital. Put that money. This was a lady. I'm not supposed to tell you this, she said, but my advice to you is put that money in a bank. Work out a payment arrangement with the hospital. They do that. And until you get your arm fixed and you're able to get a job. So, and in all of that, I was trying to get disability, something. And I had just quit my job with another attorney. He wanted me to file a workman's personal injury case. I didn't want to do it again because it wasn't the building's fault. So he fought me in whatever I could do, and I didn't get that benefit. So here I am filing for unemployment, and they tell me, well, you have to call 3 jobs every day. And I'm like, but my arm is broken. They were like, you still have to do it. So I would call, or every week, I would call and say, my arm is broken, but I have to apply for a job, so can I put you down? That's basically what I was doing. And I was looking in the newspaper, and in looking in the newspaper, I ran across an ad they were looking for, University of Miami was looking to give out scholarships to people in the work field, non-teachers, to get a master's in special ed. So I called about it, I inquired about it, and I applied. And I had to take the GRE. I had to do all this stuff, but here's God. I aced the GRE. I max aced it. I did amazingly well. I didn't think I did, but I scored. I went to apply for the scholarship and they asked me if my family could help and they could give me a partial so they could spread out the grant money. And I said, if I don't get the scholarship, full scholarship, I can't do this. And it was geared to people that were working. So basically, you would go to school from 5 to 7:30, 4 days a week. And it took 2.5 years to get that master's. And so right at the same time, my arm was starting to get better. I had gone through physical therapy, and I went to a temp agency to see if I could get a job. I never wanted to be in a law firm again. That's where I landed. But that law firm was excited that I was going back to school. So they said I could get out of school. I could get out of work 10, 15 minutes early, grab the Metro Rail. I didn't have a car, and that would take me directly to the university. I got the full scholarship. I mean, it's just the Lord. And then, I had the money that this lady had given me. And my mom was watching all of this, I remember, and she said, I don't understand your faith, but I cannot deny that God is blessing you. And he answers your prayers. And so there was this, I mean, that's a lot. It's condensed, but it's long testimonies. But God was just doing amazing things for me. My cousin, the sister of that cousin that wrecked my car had moved in with me. She was working part-time, and she was coming into the faith. She was starting to go to church with me. She cried. She said, we used to make fun of you, but we're watching. God is just doing stuff for you. And so she got baptized by, I remember Bishop was coming into town and another gentleman there, and they took her to the church, and she got baptized in Jesus' name while she was living with me. And then she, after a while, went to live to Dominican Republic. So the Lord was just doing amazing things in my life. And then, I still was messing up, but he was still blessing me, and people were still encouraging me. So.
Thus is the ministry of our Father's heart through us. Our utmost desire is to be in the Father's heart, to know the Father's heart, and express the Father's heart to you. If you appreciate listening to this podcast and were blessed, pass it along to someone else by text, email, or word of mouth in the hopes that they might be positively impacted as you were. If you are interested in supporting our efforts, we would ask you to consider the following. 1. Pray for us. 2. Leave a positive rating or review with whomever you listen to our podcast with. And 3. If you desire to contribute monetarily, you can do so at paypal.me/JBenJesus, or you can Cash App $JBenJesus, or you can Venmo at JBenJesus. That's JBenJesus. God bless.